Let's talk about all or nothing thinking or either or thinking, because this is a thinking trap that you are in utter control of and it will increase your suffering. Now, I can't speak for you, but life is already hard enough. I don't want more suffering. Now, I've done over 1,000 psychometrics testings, and all of my one-on-one clients and my peer advisory clients all go through my root analysis, which is my deep dive diagnostic. And most of my clients, I'm going to say probably 85% or more, struggle with the thinking trap, all or nothing thinking. It's also called either or thinking. Now, here's the reality of thinking traps. They are going to help you identify what the core root of your toxicity is. Now, long story short, every toxic thing boils down to toxic shame. That is always going to be the ultimate core issue. However, you can't just attack the toxic shame. You have to attack things in layers. I have healed from a severe childhood trauma experience. I got a 10 out of 10 on that exam. Didn't have to study for it. I aced it. Probably the only test I've ever aced in my life without studying, if I can be blunt. And one thing that really helped me heal from my toxic shame and my childhood wounds was really paying attention to my thinking traps, paying attention to what I was thinking. Now, again, we know the higher your thinking traps is, which I do have a free assessment on my website, the more you are in autopilot thinking, meaning you are going through the motions. You're not really aware of what you're thinking, which means your self-awareness is slightly poor and you have really poor metacognition. Metacognition is true intellect. It's being aware of what you are thinking about ultimately. Today, I really want to just help you examine one of the 17 most common thinking traps, which is all or nothing thinking. It's also called either or thinking. It is defined as seeing things as black or white, right or wrong, with nothing in between. It's this or that, right? And it's very, very rigid to some degree. So let me give you some examples, right? I didn't finish writing that paper, so it was a complete waste of time. Or if I'm not 100% in shape, then there's no point in playing. Or I didn't get the golf game I wanted, so it was a crap golf game, right? These are very black or white. I either win or I fail. Now, the potential weeds that are stemming from this type of thinking, right? Because the all or nothing thinking is really a symptom of deeper weeds. And I like to do diagnostic, not behavior modification. So the potential weeds, and I, again, have built a deep root analysis that examines your temperament, your personality, and your current psychometrics to figure out where you're missing the bar. We analyze your thinking patterns because 95% of our thoughts are the same every single day, and 80% of people's thoughts are negative, which is just terrible, right? And so there's ample opportunity for us to just pay attention to what is running through our minds today. And what I have noticed, I've been aggregating this data for 10 years now. What I have noticed is if someone has all or nothing thinking, there's a 99.9% chance that they struggle with perfectionism. That is one of the potential weeds. Okay. Now that perfectionism is protecting them from rejection, which is ultimately protecting them from toxic shame. And so that's one of the ways you have to get to that toxic shame is then dealing with that perfectionism. Once you deal with the perfectionism, then you deal with the rejection issues. Once you deal with the rejection, then you can actually face the core issue of that toxic shame and how that thread is playing out, right? This is very, very surgical. And so these fibers, like think of your muscles and think about how there's a lot of fibers that create your bicep. Right? We're taking each fiber to figure out, hey, where's your toxicity brewing? The other weed that I see, and it's 99.9% of the time right, is pride. And it's needing to be right. That is how that specific pride is really coming about. There's also fear of failure, which fear of failure and perfectionism work hand in hand. And that's believing one choice could ruin everything. And here's the thing, you could be operating with a healthy soul, right? A lot of my clients have done the work with me. We've improved their psychometrics. We've healed their toxicity. We've healed the wounds, but their nervous system is still operating with that fear of failure, which still causes them to stumble. And then the last weed that I see if one struggles with all or nothing thinking is you struggle to give grace, not just grace to yourself, but grace to others. All right. With that being said, we've gone through an example, we've gone through the definition, we've gone through potential weeds. Now let's look at manifestation. This is how all or nothing thinking is going to manifest, right? And what I'm trying to do is explain all of this so that your self-awareness will grow, so that when you find yourself in black and white thinking or either or thinking or all or nothing thinking, you're able to go, oh crap, I'm operating this way and I need to reconsider. So the manifestation is you're going to perceive everything in extremes. There's going to be no middle grounds. It's going to greatly impact how you judge yourself. Basically, if you're not brilliant or error-free, then you must be a failure. Therefore, there's no room for mistakes. And right there, when I say if you're not brilliant or error-free, then you must be a failure. There's no room for mistakes. The real weeds that are playing out are perfectionism, rejection, and toxic shame. And it's all in there in that one little sentence I said. You're also going to have critical self-talk. You're going to be very, very hard on yourself and easily disgusted with yourself when you do not hit this ideal extreme. And sometimes this ideal extreme will be more implicit than explicitly stated. You will just be like frustrated with it, if that makes sense. Now, let's look at the antidote, because we've got to learn how to think better and not fall into this trap. Because I don't know about you, but I don't want more suffering in my life. I've already had a Shinosky ton of suffering. I'm over suffering, right? Like, let me not add more pain to my life. So one of the things you have to start remembering is you need to start catching yourself in this thought process, but that can be hard. Let's just be honest. It can be really hard to identify what you're saying. So what I want you to start intentionally saying, like as much as you can, just randomly throughout the day, is this. You can even put it on a note card or on your phone. There are no absolutes, right? Now, there's always the exception to the rule. That's how we stay in the gray. But really, there's very few absolutes when we are participating in this thinking trap, right? In life, there are absolutes. But most of the time when we are participating in an all or nothing thinking trap, there truly are no absolutes. Now, either or all or nothing thinking is a form of absolutizing. Basically, your toxic shame is trying to get you to believe that you need to be more than human, or if you're not more than human, then you are less than human, right? And this is the basis of grandiose thinking. The reality is there are no black and white judgments. The world is gray. So one thing I want you to start to do is think in terms of percentages. For example, about 55% of the time I'm selfish, but the rest of the time I'm loving and generous. Or about 90% of the time, my golf game is ideal and 10% of the time it's crap. Or, 80% of the time I feel really disoriented and I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. And 20% of the time I get it, right? And so what we're really trying to do is learn how to think on a spectrum instead of absolutizing everything. And here's the reality about grandiose thinking. Grandiosity is going to go in one of two directions, right? It's going to be inflation, which is I'm special, I'm exceptional, I'm above ordinary rules, I'm destined for something others aren't, right? And that grandiosity protects against the toxic shame by making the self bigger than everyone else, right? Because ultimately you're insecure, you feel inferior, you don't feel worthy, you don't feel good enough. And so the belief is if I'm exceptional, I can't be defective. And so what you're also struggling with here is great approval seeking, right? You really need other people or external sources to validate your worth and your worthiness. The second direction that grandiosity goes, because this is part of all or nothing thinking, is deflation. Nothing will ever work for me, right? So it's a victimization. It's self-pity, right? I'm uniquely cursed. My situation is worse than anyone else's. No one understands how bad it really is. This is still grandiosity, just in the opposite direction, because the self is still exceptional, just exceptionally broken instead of exceptionally gifted, right? Now, here's the reality. Sometimes when we're saying these things, it's hard to really get clear on like, what's the core root, right? Like I've spent years, probably 11, 12 years studying linguistics, studying the root issue to why people say what they say, because people will tell you their problems, right? So what I'm asking you to do is start paying attention to when you start to fear failure, when you start to believe you need to be perfect, when you start to see the world in black or white, right or wrong, this or that? Yes or no, right? Because those are indicators that your toxic shame is actually fueling your behavior right now. And again, it's going to go perfectionism, rejection, toxic shame. And so you've got to follow the white bunny at the end of the day.